Hello, welcome to our kickoff event of this new series. This is our High Holiday series. It's called Standing Together, Prayer, Presence, and the Power of Community. And the sessions that we're going to be hosting as part of this series for our JTS webinar are in conjunction with our new High Holiday Reader, which just dropped last week. And this is a supplement for your holiday services. In thinking about this, we wanted to have a way to go a little bit deeper into what our contributors were saying. And so I was really delighted that Rabbi Jan Uhrbach agreed to help collaborate on the reader itself, but then also that we could take this particular topic and go a little deeper, because I think so many of us, when we think of the high holidays, we get this sense of richness, and we also get this sense of, I don't know, impatience that there's so much going on. Why are they so long? Why am I, not walking out before we get to Musaf or, for these particular services? So I'm really excited to be able to think through what it means to be really engaged with my services with Rabbi Uhrbach. I want to thank all of you for coming. And thank you, many of you, for donating to support this series. This is what makes the Division of Professional and Lifelong Studies work at JTS. My name is Ellie Gettinger. I'm the Director of Outreach for the Division of Professional and Lifelong Studies, and it's been a delight thinking through this. If you are so inclined, sponsorship opportunities are available, and you'll find information about that on our website. I think Tani, my delightful and wonderful colleague, is posting information about that right now. So let's get into what we're going to look at today. Today, the title of our session is Beyond the Sermon: What the High Holiday Prayers Offer and Demand. And our speaker today is Rabbi Jan Uhrbach. She's the director of the Block Kolker Center for Spiritual Arts at JTS. And she teaches a course that she created called The Art of Leading Prayer. So while we won't be necessarily leading prayer, we are in this place of how do we follow prayer? How do we stay engaged when we're feeling that kind of sense of burnout? In addition to her work at JTS, she's also the founding rabbi at Gesher, the Bridge Shul in Bridgehampton, Long Island. And she played a key role in developing Machzor Lev Shalem, which we'll be using today. And really, I think there is nobody better to give us insight into this question of engagement and discourse within our high holiday service, how to be participants and not just passive, how to be active participants versus passive participants. We're going to have time for questions during and at the end of the program. Rabbi Uhrbach says, if you have something that's pressing, please send it to me now. I'll potentially interrupt her, but we'll please share your thoughts and questions with me. This is all based on a piece she wrote for our High Holiday Reader, which I believe that link is being shared or has been shared. And the title of that piece is Prayer is Hard, and That's the Point. And so I'm excited to get into, I think we know the prayer is hard piece, and I'm excited to understand a little bit more about what the point of that is. If you have technical questions, my colleague Tani is going to be on. And if you have Q&A questions, please send those my way. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Uhrbach.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and welcome everybody, and Shana Tova. As you just heard, this is a follow-up to elaborate on the piece that I wrote in JTS's High Holiday Reader. So I'm going to be a little bit informal today. I'm going to assume that many of you have either read or will read that piece, and I'm going to use our time to expand on it, and I want to leave room for questions that you had about it or what I say. And I want to also note that I see a lot of wonderful colleagues here. And although this is primarily a seminar for those of us sitting in the pews, I'm sort of excited that we have this mixed group, because prayer, I think, is something that we need to talk about. Those leading prayer and those participating as congregants in prayer, and we don't often get a chance to talk about that. So I'm going to be sharing some of my perspective. In addition to being at JTS, I am in the pulpit as someone who leads prayer regularly, and both the joys and the frustrations that come with that. So I want to open by saying that this is a year when I don't think I'm saying anything that will surprise anyone. We are anticipating the High Holy Days with great spiritual and emotional need. These are really hard times. And I think most of us are hungry for something that we're going to get on the high holidays. And many of us, I think, imagine that the primary way that we will get that is through the sermon, right? We want the rabbi to say something that will give us comfort and direction and help us make meaning and help make everything we're seeing around us in the world better or easier to bear or give us hope or whatever it is that we're struggling with. And I want to say on behalf of our colleagues who are here, first of all, it's a lot of pressure. Second of all, I'm confident that many of us, hopefully all of us, will get that, or at least some of that from the sermon, from what the rabbi says. But the sermon or the teaching on the holy days is actually a pretty small part of the day, time-wise. And no matter how great that sermon is, and no matter how well delivered, listening to someone say something can only give us so much, right? There is different work that prayer does that involves us actively, that the best teacher in the world cannot substitute for, right? And so prayer is important. And I'll talk a little bit about how and why I think so. But first, I just want to acknowledge what we all know, which is that prayer is hard, right? It's hard. This is not a simple, easy thing. And I think sometimes we don't talk a lot about the process of prayer. Not just in our movement, as Jews generally, Christians talk about it a lot more than Jews do, right? And I think a lot of us have this feeling that like somehow we should just know how to do it, or we're flawed in some way. And that's not true. It's hard. It's a practice. And for all kinds of reasons, sitting in synagogue for the length of services that we have and praying is hard, right? Our mind wanders, our backs hurt. We get restless or distracted, and sometimes the liturgy is unfamiliar and we have no idea what we're saying, and sometimes it's so familiar that we're actually on autopilot, and a half hour goes by and we haven't even been aware that we're saying anything at all. We're not even paying attention. We're just like mouthing words, right? There's liturgy that's at odds with what we believe. We look at these words and we say, that's not my theology, or that's not my experience. And there are metaphors we can't relate to or that we reject outright. I want to commend on this point Arnie Eisen's recent book. I'm blanking on the title right now, but former Chancellor of JTS Arnie Eisen published a book last year about his own theology. And his chapter on Yom Kippur deals with how alienating and difficult some of these images are. And, we struggle theologically. Some of us reject traditional notions of God outright. Prayer can make us feel foolish. What am I doing here? Right? What's going on here? And some of us have a hard time getting out of the purely intellectual mode in our heads. Right, Seeking the Hiding God. That's the book. Thank you. Now, and on the high holidays, prayer is especially hard because it's especially long. And it is very repetitive. Like, we don't have to run away from that fact. That's true. On Rosh Hashanah, there are so many themes going on. It's reflected in all the names of Rosh Hashanah, right? Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year, the new year. It's also called Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. It's Yom HaTruah, the day of the shofar Truah. It's Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. Is it joyful? Is it terrifying? It's both. It's the coronation day, right? There's like a million different themes. Yom Kippur is much more focused, but it's an emotional roller coaster. You go from the joy of taking out the Torah, and then you're in Yizkor, and then you have the terror of Unatana Toketh, and then you have the beauty of the Avodah service, and then you're in LA Eskara, and you're grieving and all the martyrdom of our people for the history of Judaism, right? This is complicated, hard stuff. So why is it worth it? And I am absolutely convinced it is worth it, right? With all of the difficulties. And as I wrote in the piece, and as I say to my congregation every year, and I think this is important to remember, services are not long because we have a lot of liturgy. We have a lot of liturgy because we need a long service, right? We don't think we need a long service. There's so much pressure now for everything to be short. It is very countercultural in our world right now to say that there is a process that actually lasts all day or half a day. We want quick fixes. Prayer isn't like that. So why is prayer important? So I want to start with the notion, first of all, that prayer is service to God. It's a halakhic obligation. And the answer is yes, it is. Yes. That's an important piece, and I don't want to give short shrift to that. What I do want to do is give everyone here permission to think of that very broadly. What does it mean, prayer as service to God? I don't think of it personally as just, I have to fulfill an obligation to say specific words at specific times. I think of my obligation to God and prayer as service of the heart, as, especially but not only on the high holy days, dedicating time in my life on a regular basis to turn toward God and attend toward my spiritual life, right? If you don't like God language, whatever language is helpful, to affirm values and commitments that are important to me, to affirm them as important and valuable, right? That I am setting aside time to say, these things matter. And I want to say that they have power. This is also a way in which prayer is very countercultural right now. We think of power only as power over, as military might or financial power or political power, right? This is about claiming there is a whole realm of the spirit that matters and that is powerful in the world. It is not only countercultural. I want to say that in the times that we are living in, prayer is in many ways an act of resistance. It is standing against a culture that says that truth doesn't matter, kindness doesn't matter, values don't matter. What matters is power. Prayer is stepping out of that and saying, no, these things matter. Right? That it is an act of resistance. And I want to give you an example in the prayer book of the way I promised Ellie that I would share some of my favorite pieces of the Machzor with you. So this is one of my total favorite pages in the Machzor. It's in the handout. It's page 155 of the Machzor, and it comes from the Musaf service on Rosh Hashanah. In the Amidah, in the repetition of the Amidah, in the section of Malchuyot, which is when we are crowning God as sovereign. This is one of the most problematic metaphors we have, right? What does it mean to crown God as sovereign? What are we talking about? So there are two pieces here that I love about this page. And I'm just going to give it a second so you can see it. It's not that page, it's further down. There we go. It's this one. Okay. So this is a Great. Okay. So there's two things on this page that I want to show you. One is the main text. And the main text is a piyut. A piyut is a liturgical poem. One reason why High Holy Day services are so long is because we have all these additional poems in. And the poems give us an opportunity to sing together. And they also give us an opportunity to expand on, to riff on a theme. This one is riffing on the theme of God as sovereign. And it's a metaphor that often doesn't work for us now. What this poem is about, and this is a piece of a much longer poem, we didn't include the whole poem, is the contrast between God as imaginary sovereign and what an earthly sovereign is. And so most of the verses that we have here are Melech Elyon, the sovereign on high, the supernal sovereign. And you can see in the translation here, or if you want to read the Hebrew, that all of the descriptions and what we attribute to God as sovereign have to do with righteousness and justice and care and concern for the people, listening to those who cry out, being good, right? Like being intuitive and understanding and perceiving what is hidden and rewarding the righteous, and a rule that is marked by tranquility, by a sense of peace, and all the things we want in life. And then we included only one of these verses. The original poem would have gone back and forth. You see where it's highlighted in the yellow and it says the ark is closed. The ark is closed because in the alternate verses, instead of talking about the Melech Elyon, the sovereign on high, we talk about the Melech Evyon, the pathetic, impoverished, earthly sovereign, right? And the pathetic, impoverished, earthly sovereign, we close the ark when we talk about this aspect, it's earthly power, who is chased by exhaustion, half asleep, enveloped in chaos, and fundamentally time limited. Right? And so we close the ark, we make that contrast, and then we open the ark again and we go back to the Melech Elyon. Now, what is this about? This isn't only about a metaphor of God as power and king. This is about our assertion that earthly abuses of power are fundamentally limited, that there is something bigger, more powerful, eternal, that we can rely on, right? And it's actually, I mean, this is absolutely liturgy of resistance, right? Written during times when people lived under a king before whom they felt utterly powerless.
That actually is a question. Someone was wondering, what's the origin of the poem?
Yeah, so you know, this is a medieval poem. I don't have the exact dating on it, but it's coming from a time when, in the Middle Ages, when kings had absolute power, right? And to me, this is such an evocative poem about exactly what I'm talking about, the ability to say political power in the world is not all there is. Right now, I don't want to spend too much time on one thing, but I want to look at what we put in the margin here. And this is one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite pages. Because juxtaposed with this poem, this classical medieval piyut, we put a contemporary poem by Denise Levertov, which offers an entirely different way of thinking of Malchut. If the metaphors of, if talking about God is off-putting, if the idea of God's power in that way is challenging for us, then we look in the margin and we read an entirely different image. And the poem is called The Thread. Something is very gently, invisibly, silently pulling at me. A thread or net of threads finer than cobweb and as elastic. I haven't tried the strength of it. No barbed hook pierced and tore me. Was it not long ago this thread began to draw me, or way back? Was I born with its knot about my neck, a bridle? Not fear, but a stirring of wonder makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it, when I thought it had loosened itself and gone. Now, this is a completely different entry point into High Holiday prayer. It's about sitting not with an image of God as all-powerful, but as feeling claimed by something so gentle, but nevertheless strong, that I can't quite turn away from. What a different way of thinking about prayer. And I want to suggest that one way to pray on the High Holy Days is to look at a page like this and just move back and forth between the images and see how they resonate for you. Which is more powerful? What do you resonate with? Why? Why are you there? What makes you come year after year? Is it an image of God? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it something that just pulls us, right? That we feel accountable to, that is demanding something. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to raise. So let's unshare so I can see more of you. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about what I mean now by the difference between prayer and learning, right? Like what the sermon can do and what the prayer can do. I didn't write about this extensively. The former JKS Chancellor, Rabbi Dr. Louis Finkelstein, was famous for saying, "When I pray, I speak to God. When I study, God speaks to me." Right? It's a beautiful line. It's a bit of an overstatement, right? I think things are, or oversimplification. I think that's not entirely true. The prayer can be revelatory, right? Prayer can be a moment when we learn something about our world or about ourselves. It's not only about what we need to say, it's about what we need to hear. And I don't want to overstate the difference between what we learn in a good teaching or in a sermon and what we can learn in prayer and how they work. But I do think that lasting change, if we want to feel transformed on the High Holy Days, whether we want to change a way of being or repair a relationship or calm our fears or renew our hope, we have to participate in some more active way than just listening. Most transformational processes require that, right? If anyone has ever, been in therapy, for example, we know that sometimes the therapist says really important, good things, but no one would go to therapy and think, I'm just going to listen for 15 minutes a week and not bring something of myself to the table and get anything out of it, right? High Holy Days are similar. We have to bring something. And I'm going to speak a little very personally here, right? My congregation, like most, has a little bit of a post-sermon exodus from the High Holy Days. People come to hear me teach, and it's flattering, and it's lovely, and it breaks my heart a little bit every year. It breaks my heart because I know that people are often missing out on the best parts of the prayer that are to come, and also that they would actually get more from my teaching if they were there for the prayer. Because when I teach in the context of prayer, the way I think about it is sort of like the prayer leading up to what you might hear in the sermon is kind of tilling the soil of the soul. It's loosening us up. It's creating openness to hearing something new, to thinking of something differently. And after we've heard teaching, the prayer that follows gives us time to digest, to integrate, and also to move sort of from the left brain intellectual stuff into the right brain creativity and make your own connections with what you just heard. If we short circuit that process and we're there just for the teaching, we're actually missing some of what your rabbi's teaching can do. I also want to say that and this is one of the reasons why when people struggle with prayer, coming late and leaving early is a self-defeating strategy to deal with it. Because the service, the liturgy has a whole arc. And usually the rabbis that I know, some of whom are here, also are planning an arc. And when we say, well, I can't really, like the prayer is boring, I can't really get into it. It's sort of like going to a Broadway show and saying, well, I only have time for 20 minutes. So I'm going to go for the middle. And I'm not going to be there for the beginning. I'm not going to be there for the end. And then you walk out and you say, well, it was nice. The dancing was good, but like, I didn't really totally get the point. Well, of course we didn't get the point, right? We missed the whole narrative arc. And there is an arc to the High Holy Days. And what happens in the Jewish community is because we don't understand that we have a lot of liturgy because we need to be there a long time, we end up with congregants who pick and choose a short part of the service. And then we prayer leaders feel like, well, we have to adjust what we do to give people what our main point is, like right in the middle, and everyone's there, and it distorts what we're doing. But I actually hear this from every year when I teach the art of leading prayer. The biggest objection my students do is like, well, how do we do this when people aren't there at the beginning and they're not there at the end? And so we've created this cycle in which our services are not as good as they could be because we can't make them as good as they could be because people aren't there to experience what they could be. And then people don't come because, it's kind of boring, right? So we have to break that cycle. So a couple other things I want to talk about. One, about why it's so important to sit with prayer for a long time. And one of the things that prayer offers us, which is so important in this time, is that it opens for us a world of poetry. And I mean by that a little of what we've already talked about, right? These are metaphors. We don't have to take the words of the liturgy literally in order to take them seriously. We understand this as poetry. And also, we are in a world of poetry in the sense that prayer enables us to hold both ends, conflicting feelings and thoughts at one and the same time, in a way that we often can't do in our regular life, because we're making decisions and we're acting and we're doing and we make choices and our attention is here or there. But there are precious few opportunities in life to sit with the conflicts that we feel. And those conflicts need to be experienced in order to shape us ethically and also emotionally. So I'll give us an example of this, and this happens to be one of my favorite poems in the book. It's on page 60 in the Siddur opposite Ashrei. Ashrei is one of the best known prayers in our liturgy. We have it every day, not just in the High Holy Days. We put next to it on page 60 this poem by Miriam Baruch Halfi. And the poem, it's coming up on the screen here, in the left-hand margin, reads as follows. Day in, day out, I swallow the beauty of the world, this hungering beauty. My God, open windows within me to let the world enter calmly and peacefully, that more of the world enter. The world that I love, cry over, and love again and again. This little poem encapsulates so much about what prayer is about, right? That our goal is to open ourselves, to create more inner space, to let down our guard, to do whatever we need to do to open windows to experience more of the world, and to have a sense of calmness and peace, to calm our central nervous systems a little bit, that we may take in more of the world. And then this beautiful end, the world that I love, cry over, and love again and again. That three lines at the end, that seems to me where so many of us are sitting this year, right? That we love this world so much, so much. And there's so much to cry over that sometimes we lose the love. And prayer, and especially this year, prayer on the High Holy Days, I think, is an opportunity to sit with both. I love, and therefore I cry, and it reminds me how much I love. And they're both true, right? What do we need more than that this year? Is to sit and let marinate in our souls. This world and this life is so precious and so beautiful. And we have so much to be grateful for. And I love this so much. And there is so much to cry over. And I can hold both. What a grace. But that, I think, is in many ways the essence of what prayer is about. While we have this on the screen, let's go quickly to page 204, and I'll take you to one more poem, because this is one that I read every year aloud as part of our service on Kol Nidre night. And we use it at the very beginning of our Kol Nidre service because it speaks to another piece of what prayer, especially on the High Holy Days, is about. At the very bottom, it says Kol Nidre in the, we can scroll up just a little. This is a poem by Merle Feld, Kol Nidre. I am grateful for this, a moment of truth. Grateful to stand before you in judgment. You know me as a liar, and I am flooded with relief to have my darkest self exposed at last. Every day I break my vows to be the dutiful child, selfless parent, caring friend, responsible citizen of the world. No one sees, no one knows how often I take the easy way. I let myself off the hook, give myself the benefit of the doubt every day, on this day, this one day. I stand before you naked, without disguise, without embellishment, naked, shivering, ridiculous. I implore you, let me try again. So this is a poem. I open our Kol Nidre service with this poem every year, and every year it brings me to tears. And I will say that reading it just now didn't bring me to tears. Why? Because I'm not in prayer. Prayer allows us to experience what this poem is expressing, not alone, but in the privacy of our hearts. And it is a great relief to stand in prayer and say, this is me. No pretense, no makeup, no cover, nothing. This is who I am. There are so few places in our lives where we really get to do that. It is a relief to be seen through in that way and to offer the simple prayer, let me try again. If you ask me, all of Yom Kippur is in many ways about this, but it's not so easy to get there. Most of us can't walk off the street on Kol Nidre night and immediately be in this mode, right? Maybe by the afternoon, if we stay long enough, we'll have a moment when we really feel, wow, I feel fully present, open, exposed in this way. And it is a relief, right? And we are reminded in prayer of how flawed we are, how vulnerable for all of our judgment and the amount of time that we may spend being angry at this and angry at that and judging of those people and the other people. And right? This is a moment to say, well, who am I? And we come in with defenses. We can't just peel them off instantly and be in this moment. It takes time. I want to say that we are reminded also, and we can unshare, we are reminded also of our nobility in these moments of prayer and our power, right? So many of us feel helpless during this time. It's like the big things happening in the world are so big. What can I do? Spending time in with the liturgy reminds us, no, wait, I'm created, I have dignity, I'm made in the image of God, and I'm here with all these other people. And we share something. Look at the power in this community. We're not helpless. We are made in God's image. We're not supreme, but we're not disempowered. And we may be humble and flawed, but we are not alone. Holding that is so important to be to come back to and it takes time. I'm going to stop here because I imagine there's some questions and comments.
Yeah, there are a couple, and I think I'm going to start with this one. I think one of the challenges is this sense of kind of medieval punishment that sometimes feels very alienating. The questioner asks, what do we do with all the prayers that are so harsh and talk about God's judgment? And, that's not really how I'd like to think about God and my life in this world. And, how do you position that?
Yeah. So I have a few answers to that. One is I come back to that sense that this is part of the problem of coming for a little bit of the service. Because there is actually an arc to these days in which, as I wrote in the piece, God moves from Kisei Hadin to Kisei Harachamim. God moves from the throne of judgment to the throne of compassion, right? And I think and we feel it over the course of those days if we allow ourselves to do that. That matters because on the one hand, that image of God as judging and punishing is very alien to a lot of us, right? It's not my favorite liturgy either. And I don't believe it's actually literally true. I do not believe personally, we all have different beliefs. You're free to believe what you want from within what we say here. I don't believe that God is sitting in judgment and smiting people for being evil, right? Like I don't believe that when we say in the Unatana Tokef, who shall live and who shall die, it has to do with whether somebody prayed well enough during Yom Kippur or whether they Rosh Hashanah, whether they were good or evil people during the year. We know that lots of evil people thrive and lots of people do a lot of good, suffer, and most of us all of us really are an admixture of good and bad. And I don't believe any of that. What I do believe is that it's important to confront and take seriously that there is justice in the world. So the language of God as judge, as that language of punishment, I take as an affirmation that deeds have consequences, that things matter. I don't want a world that is only kindness and forgiveness, where there is no accountability. I need to believe there is accountability in this world. Otherwise, my deeds don't matter either. And I need to know that accountability can yield to compassion and grace and love, and that they both exist in this world. And I need help often moving from one to the other. And so that move in the liturgy in which we imagine actually it's Rosh Hashanah, that is the day of judgment, and on Yom Kippur, God is on the throne of compassion. Right? It's about we've been forgiven. This is about atonement. This is about being cleansed so that we can start anew. This is not actually about judgment. This is about being in the presence of a loving God before whom I can reveal everything and do what I need to do to repair and receive the ritual that makes me feel I've been forgiven. So what do we do with those images? I I I mean, one thing we can do is turn away from them, right? If they are really alienating, and sometimes one is in a place in one's life where it's impossible to sit with them. I've had, you know, long conversations with congregants, especially like I'm remembering one in particular who had a life-threatening terminal diagnosis. And that language of who shall live and who shall die was impossible. And one possibility is one doesn't pray that. One moves in a different direction. One can look in the margins and pray what's there. One can sit and listen to the music and experience just a sense of awe. One can drash it or, interpret it and experience it as poetry and think, well, what does that open for me? Right? What does this language, how does it help me experience accountability and awe and listen to my own sense of judgment of what is acceptable within my own behavior and not, right? There are ways of managing it that don't involve praying it literally. But I don't, and I would always give us permission to turn to something else. If that's really alienating, to sit and say, okay, I can't sit with that right now. I'm gonna turn the page and read something else. I'm gonna close my eyes and just listen. That's sort of what I would say. Or here's another strategy, right? It's hard for me to sit and hear God described as judging and punishing in this way, because there's so much judgment and harshness and vengeance in our world today. I see this liturgy, and I'm going to use this moment to locate the kindest place within me. Right? I want to act in contrast. This rubs me the wrong way for the following reasons, and I want to find the place within that is the opposite of that. I want to plead with God, so to speak, to not be that way, and I'm going to do it by modeling it. Right? There's good, solid basis in our tradition for that. Lots of midrashim where various figures challenge God's harshness and say, if I can forgive, why can't you? Right? One can say, I want less of this judgment in the world and more kindness. That's what I'm speaking very personally. It's part of where I'm sitting this year, is that we need more kindness in the world. Are there other?
Yeah. So as we're going through this and you're picking out the poems and you're connecting them, I just keep having this view that it's like first, this is kind of how involved were you in this kind of curation process and finding those modalities that connected? And one of the other participants has said, I just wish the prayers and language were more relatable. So I actually was interested in, was there a tactic you were thinking through as you were, say, connecting this sense of, an earthly impoverished sovereign in the thread? Like, what were that you were looking for in trying to build that relatability? And then, of course, any strategies, I know you pointed to some of them already, to build that sense of relatability within a service so that it doesn't feel like we're speaking someone else's words.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Yes, we did. We absolutely, when we were putting commentaries and readings in the margins of the Machzor, we were looking for the places where we anticipated that people struggled to connect. Right? The language that's hard. Either it's hard to understand it intellectually, I don't even know what this means, or it's hard to relate to because this isn't language that I would use, or this is an emotion that's hard for me to, I don't want to envision God in this way, or whatever the problem is, right? We were looking for those places, and we were looking to give people bridges to help connect. But I do want to say that processes that really affect us, and this comes back to what I mean by active engagement. The more effort we put in, the more impact it has on us. And so if the liturgy were 100% completely accessible, it would have about as much impact on us as a Hallmark card. That's nice. The liturgy is not always nice, and it's not always easy. It asks us to get out of our usual way of thinking and meet it halfway, right? It demands that we think differently or that we stretch. And it's in that stretch and it's in that effort that we get the benefit, right? Like prayer is not just sitting and reading a book that we agree with. There are lots of places we can do that. That's not prayer. Prayer is the work of struggling with, what do I really believe about the world? Who am I really? What gives my life meaning? And in a less intellectual way, the experience of connecting with something beyond oneself. The experience of getting out of one's own prosaic worldview and the way we move about the world, and genuinely experiencing, even for a moment, something different. And so just as prayer being long is part of the point, prayer being a little bit of the liturgy being a little bit of a reach for us is part of the point. And I want to say this also about music. This is really important. We are living in a time where we want easily singable, totally accessible music 100% of the time, right? We think of participation as singing along, and I want to be able to sing along easily. And there's real value in that. And there's a place for that in every service. There should be some music like that. But if the music is only that, we are really missing something. Because really good liturgical music shouldn't be, all of it shouldn't be that predictable, that we know exactly what's coming next, and so it's easy to sing. Because there will never be a chord progression that will go, oh, that's not what I expected. That will never cause that intake of breath. That will never be beyond our ability to connect immediately. And that means the liturgy is not connecting us to something beyond us. And the point of prayer is to connect to something beyond. And really connect, not just think about it, but connect to it and feel it, right? We need that. And so we have to allow our cantors or our singing rabbis or, to do music that will challenge us a little bit, right? We want that in almost every other aspect of life. No one would go to a trainer who only does stuff that's easy, that you already can do easily and never pushes your body. What's the point? Right? You would never go to a concert that isn't something that you couldn't just sing by yourself in the back, in the shower, right? You want things that challenge you a little bit. We need it in our spiritual lives too. And so if we enter the liturgy that way, this isn't something that I'm supposed to get immediately. I'm supposed to have to work a little bit. I'm supposed to feel a little jarred and alienated sometimes. And the work of bridging that gap is what's going to yield the meaning. Then it changes the whole reason we're there. So I'm aware that I could talk about this forever. So I want to make sure that I get to a few of the strategies. Is it okay if I move to some of that?
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to say a couple of things. One other thing. Before I get to the strategies, I recently listened to a podcast that had a phrase that just has stayed with me. And the phrase is, connection is stronger than anxiety. The metaphor that was used is the metaphor of salt in water. If you put a lot of salt in a small cup of water, you will not be able to drink it. If you put it in a quart of water, it will be diluted. If you put it in that same amount in an even bigger space, a bigger amount of water, at some point you won't even taste it. The more connected we are And this podcast talked about there being actually scientific research about this. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a cognitive scientist, but that the more connected we are and the bigger the connection, the less significant our anxiety, the less we feel it. So if you want to give yourself a real gift in very anxious times, spend all day in shul on Yom Kippur and allow yourself to feel that connection bigger and bigger and bigger. And I am willing to bet over the course of the day. And the connection can be with, ideally, hopefully, maybe with God or the universe or whatever we call this grand, larger oneness. It can also be with the person next to you and the person next to them. And it's why in the article, one of the strategies that I offered is at some point in the day, just close your eyes and listen to the room. Especially, it could be at a time when everybody's singing. It could be at a time when there's, quote, silence. It's never silence. Listen for someone else's breath, for a deep sigh, right? Listen for the rustling and the page turning. These are the sounds of Jewish life. It's the sounds of the life of the soul. And see if you can just feel yourself, I'm part of this room, and we're all here doing this. And we're all connected to each other. And we're all connected to Jews all over the world and synagogues all over the world doing this today. Right? Like there has to be a time on Yom Kippur when even with all the different time zones, like Jews all over the world are doing this. And I'm connected to them. And we as Jews are connected to all of humanity and all of creation. And there's this oneness. If you can touch that for one day, just listening, and everybody's feeling their joys and their gratitudes and their pains and their fears, right? And mine are just part of that. And I'm there for them and they're there for me. And we're all like in this grand cosmic drama. I guarantee you'll feel better. It's an extraordinary thing. And pick moments during the day when you do that, right? And plug in, put the book down, plug into the sounds of singing and silence and sighing and yearning, and somebody may be crying. And somebody may be hushing a child, right? Just listen. Okay, so that's one strategy. A really important strategy, two. One is remove judgment about prayer and any worry about whether you're doing it right. If you show up, you are doing it right. Just be there. There is the right words, the right choreography, the right halakha. Do I have the right intention? Am I focused? Is my head in the right place? Am I feeling enough? Is it deep enough? Is it real enough? Don't judge it. Judging it can really get in the way. Just be there. Right? I've decided to show up for this and see where it takes me. No judgment. And keep your expectations reasonable. I don't know anyone, maybe colleagues will argue with me. I don't know anyone who keeps complete focus on kavanah for the entirety of Yom Kippur. I think it's nearly impossible. I can't even do it for a full weekday mincha, which lasts 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Right? At some point, my mind, I have to do this. I have something on my list of things to do. Right? It's going to happen. It's okay. Right? Keep your expectations reasonable. You're going to be bored. You're going to move in and out of intentionality. Maybe you'll just have one moment of touching something real and deep. One moment. Right? The greatest slugger in baseball, if they're batting 300, they're good hitters, right? You're not going to bat 1,000 in prayer. You're going to have moments. That's what it's for. Those moments are precious. Also, allow yourself to treat the liturgy as a starting point. Don't put pressure on yourself to keep up with whoever is leading the prayer service to be exactly where the congregation is at all times. You do not have to pray every word in this book. You don't even have to pray close to every word in this book. Truthfully, you don't have to pray any of the words in the book, right? It's a starting point. If something moves you, stay there. Don't feel like, oh, that was amazing, and now I have to rush on and do the next thing or I'm behind. No, stay with the amazing. If something opens your heart and you start to cry, let the tears come. Stay there. You'll catch up later. It's okay. You can skip things, right? It's not about that. It's about where does it take you, and allow in the course of the day questions to bubble up. Big questions. What do I need? How am I needed? What do I have to give? What do I yearn for? Right? Like, let those questions bubble up and sit with them. And you know, sometimes it's helpful to be a little bit random, like just see what catches your eye on the page. Oh, look at that. Sometimes it lands just where you need it to be. And I would say, and I know we have to stop in a minute.
And we do have a number of questions, so I just
all right. So let's do that. Yeah, just take the questions first. More important.
Excellent. First of all, there's so many comments on how appreciated this is from rabbis, from congregants, from both sides, saying, no, this is appreciation of having this sense of the ark and what you bring into a service. But I think there's a lot of expectation on what we bring to services. One of our questioners is wondering about fasting in particular for older adults, and what point, when you can no longer fast, how do you still maintain that sense of purpose? They say in particular, is that something we need to feel bad about, or might also keep us from feeling that we're not doing it right? Like, what are the ways in which
it's a big issue. For those of us who cannot, for health reasons, fast on Yom Kippur, it is not a mitzvah to get sick, right? That is not what we are supposed to be doing. And it can feel really bad and less than if we are not able to fast. And I hope we can take that judgment out of it, right? We stand before God, beloved, offering what we have to offer and serving in the way that we can serve. And the fast is a tool, and it is a mitzvah, but it is a mitzvah to eat if we need to eat. And I think that, I'll speak very personally, because last year was the first year where, for health reasons, I was unable to fast for the whole day. I had to eat and I had to drink. And it was really painful. So I share the pain. And what I did with it for myself is I allowed myself to feel that sadness and to feel the loss, and to offer that up as a prayer, and also to express gratitude that I was able to do what I'm able to do, even if fasting isn't one of those things, and to be intentional about the food and water that I needed to take in, as what I needed to do to enable me to serve. And instead of doing it as pleasure, I did it as, this is an offering that I make. I am eating as an offering to enable me to be strong and to make it through the day without compromising my health in impermissible ways. Right? It's about that. One way also to think about it is to imagine oneself beloved by God, which we are, right? And God doesn't want us to be unhealthy or to harm ourselves in that way. But it's a hard thing. I think it's one of the ways we sit with it. And it can be a good opening to allow feelings of either aging, if that's what's going on, or if it's not about aging, but illness and changes in the body to become part of our Yom Kippur work. How am I relating to that vulnerability? How is it hard for me? What does it open for me? Might this experience of vulnerability enable me to be compassionate to others in new ways? I'm sorry, I know we have, I'm happy to stay, but I know other people need to
this
leave.
Is a particularly, clearly there's a lot of comments coming in on this. Someone had posted a mitzvah-to-eat.org has some wonderful resources. Another person is saying, in addition to the limiting the food in a kind of, sensitive way to make it food about sustenance as opposed to pleasure, that you can make a charitable donation in the amount that your food cost you, that there are also many, there are ways of making this a mindful practice and not a,
right.
That's part of this. As we're going to end, there are a couple of things. Always, if you mention a podcast, people then have the question, what's the podcast? So if you have a sense of if you can remember what that podcast is,
the podcast was Sounds True, Insights from the Edge. And the title of the podcast is Anxiety is Stronger Than, is either stronger or more powerful than, connection is stronger than anxiety. Yeah, that's the title of the episode. But the podcast is Sounds True, Insights from the Edge.
Well, and I think that this has given us such a really wonderful framework for thinking through the network that we belong to, the network that we come into when we're in shul. That this isn't, even if it's maybe not our shul or we're visiting people, or it doesn't feel like it's a home community, that we're part of this bigger piece, and we're all doing this together, and that we're part of that kind of, like, I love that as an image to take with me into this season. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know.
I just want to say, I wish we could do this as an intimate conversation for half a day, right? Like, this is so hard in an hour with a frontal where we can't share back in the way we'd like to. And maybe we'll figure out a context when we can do that. So in another setting.
Yeah. An intimate conversation with 200 of our closest friends.
Right.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I really do feel like this is, there's something to be said for starting several weeks out and setting an intention and saying, we're here and we're preparing for our holiday experience. Next week, we're going to continue that thread with David Kramer, who also wrote another one of our high holiday reader essays. This one's going to be about Jews and non-Jews and kind of visions of utopian vision in the Amida. And I'm pretty excited about that because I feel like we're in this very divided space. So finding undivided spaces is exciting to me in this moment. If you have any questions, please send them to me, Ellie. You can do that elgettinger@jtsa.edu. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And Jan, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
There's so many wonderful comments. I'll send them to you. And everyone have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Shana Tova.